Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. I'm Jim Grant, your host, and it's a privilege to be back with you again, along with my special guest, Ned Dolesji, who is the Executive Director of the California Catholic Conference based in Sacramento. As you were here last week, I hope you know that we covered a lot of topics relating to faithful citizenship. And you can see our booklet here. And if you went to the website at usccb.org, almost all the material that we covered last week could be found there. You'll understand where the bishops are guiding us with their documents and also with their material to think in a Catholic way about life. It isn't telling us for whom to vote, but it's telling us what principles guide a Catholic citizen, not only in the ballot box, but in our daily lives. The choices we make, the decisions that we live with, are guided, God willing, by a Catholic conscience, which is what we talked about last week. Ned, you might want to tell us a little bit about the California Catholic Conference, and I think we're going to see actually the list of those wonderful dioceses and archdioceses. What is the conference and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. The California Catholic Conference is the organization of the California bishops in the state of California. It's their official voice together in the public order, the 2 archbishops and the other 10 bishops in the state. So we have the 12 dioceses in the state. They form an organization. We are them, and we are their organization. And as the executive director, I'm charged with with representing them in the public order. I'm a registered lobbyist, as are a number of people on my staff, and we basically do the public policy work of the Catholic Church. In support of that, when we're into electioneering times, we offer resources for faithful citizenship, of which this program is one, and the booklet that you mentioned, Faithful Citizenship, and many other issues, many other resources are available on the California Catholic Conference website at cacatholic.org.
Let's see that website because it's a world of good information, cacatholic.org. What are some of the things you'll find there, Ned?
What you'll find there is resources, links to USCCB material, as you mentioned, links to the various dioceses and the material that they've prepared to assist citizens, Catholic social teaching as it applies to a variety of different issues, some of which we talked about last week, life and family and social justice, things like that. There are readings and resources on that. We have blogs from different faithful Catholics around the society who comment about the issues of the day, and we have the opportunity to participate in the Catholic Legislative Network. And so it's a wonderful resource for Catholics putting their faith into action. You will also find, and we're going to spend part of this program talking about the initiatives that are coming up. You'll find the piece that has the most hits of any piece we ever do, and that piece is the Catholic Reader's Digest version of the initiatives. It's a way for Catholics to take a quick look at what is this initiative, who's sponsoring it, who's funding it, and what applicable Catholic teaching would I think about as I'm praying and deciding what to do. It is by far the most hit piece of stuff we do out there.
I'm glad that it's going to be readable, very, very intelligible, and also practical. So we'd like you to go there, cacatholic.org. Not only during the election, we wanted you to know that what the Catholic philosophy is, it doesn't just become engaged every 4 years or every 2 years.
Correct.
It's something that we live with daily. And I just hope that this program this week and last week helps you to appreciate a new concept. There is a Catholic way to think. It isn't always going in one single direction, but it is an enlightened way to grasp social issues. Now, Ned, you used a word that was, I'm not going to let you get by so easily. You said you're a lobbyist. Mm-hmm. Now, lobbyists, in my mind, usually are not people I want to have a conversation with. Tell us how come lobbyist is not necessarily a dirty word.
Well, lobbyists do what I do. We bring a particular perspective to bear, and many lobbyists are lobbyists for particular industries or particular perspectives, interest groups, associations, different aspects that need to participate in the public debate. We sometimes have a bad reputation, but the reality is that politics in California is pretty squeaky clean. We have lots of public disclosure, and we file the public disclosure, reports also. What separates my lobbying from the lobbying of many of my colleagues is the fact that I lobby for the Catholic Church, and we take no position on candidates and/or parties, and we don't make any donations to candidates and/or parties. And so that frees us up, in one sense, to speak the truth to power, if you will, to comment and bring meaning to the conversations that we're engaged in, and to bring our unique Catholic perspective to bear, both for our Catholics who are politicians as well as for other Catholics that are there. And so it's a privilege to be able to do it. It's a form of evangelization.
No, we're really glad, and I wanted you to clarify, because I think when you said that, I just want people to appreciate there is a reason for which we do this. This is not just, under the covers or behind closed doors. It's a public effort to present to our legislators the Catholic position. And that's why there's a very good day every year called Catholic Lobby Day. And I've gone up there many times in the past when we had large numbers of people going up on buses. Now it's more of a focused gathering. It's less people going, but also maybe more intense gatherings with their local legislators, both the senators and the assembly members. So it is a very important service that the California Catholic Conference serves for us up in Sacramento. Now, let's shift gears one moment to something national, because we want to talk about what's going on in November in California, but there's stuff going on in our national conversation that has been front and center for months, if not years. It's the whole HHS situation with the contraceptive mandate, legislation that is being part of the Affordable Care Act. Could you please unpack any part of that, perhaps using the slide that we have, talking about the mandate that is binding us as Catholics in a very uncomfortable way?
Sure. We're all familiar with the Fortnight for Freedom that just ended this last summer, and it was in June and July. And this was an opportunity that the Catholic bishops invited us as Catholics to focus on the questions of religious liberty that have surfaced. In the Affordable Health Care Act, there is the contraceptive mandate, and that contraceptive mandate requires all employers to offer coverage, which includes contraceptives. And while we have a position as the Church on contraception, we also have a concern about the abortifacients and the surgical sterilizations that are considered part of that contraceptive mandate. What is most concerned, though, to the Catholic bishops, and particularly concerned for the bishops in the state of California, is that in that federal mandate, in this new contraceptive mandate, there is a unique and new definition of religious employer. And that definition of a religious employer is, brought together in a very, I think, disrespectful way. It talks about the fact that the only people who can claim a conscience in this particular moment are people who are in the business of inculcating values, that we're primarily employing people of our own faith, we're primarily serving people of our own faith, and we qualify in the unique IRS code for nonprofits and churches, 6033I. Now that covers us as the Catholic Diocese of Fresno. It covers us as the Catholic Parish of Our Lady of Carmel. It covers us in that regard. What it doesn't cover is what we do in the public order. It doesn't cover our Catholic charities. It doesn't cover our Catholic hospitals. It doesn't cover our Catholic higher ed. It doesn't cover certain of our Catholic schools who are out there and serve, a very diverse population of people. This definition is an affront to us as the Catholic people. And the bishops recognize that this is not where we want to go. We don't want this definition to remain in federal law. We don't want the government to view our ministries as not Catholic. They come from our commitment to Jesus Christ to serve and to be present in the society. I like to tell people it's as if the government all of a sudden decided to tell the family, and that's us in the Catholic family, that the family businesses that engage the public aren't part of the family. And it's like, well, you have no competence to tell us that. There are businesses. We know who we are, why we do them, and what we do. And the government has no competence to define this, and certainly to do it in this fashion is an affront to us who have served so long and so faithfully in this society right now. So we petition, the president, we petition Congress, and you'll see a lot of this on the diocesan website as well as on our Catholic Conference website. We petition to get this definition of religious employer removed. We would love to get the contraceptive mandate removed, but that's not going to happen. The society is committed to doing that and moving forward, but we cannot let this definition of religious employer stand. We still have to be a voice speaking that prophetic word around the contraceptive mandate, but we better be smart as foxes, and we better be addressing this definition of religious employer, because this will come back to haunt us in many ways, as we know all too well in California.
Now, there is this quote from a professor that I want to share only to see if there's a way to unpack it and figure out what might be the upside of it, or is there a way that there's a misunderstanding that she's working with. Today's Supreme Court decision upholding the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act is good news for Catholics who care for the common good as a religious value. As a Catholic, I look to the Obama administration as it considers the parameters of the religious exemption to address the reasonable concerns of Catholic institutions in a way that will seal this important victory for broadened access to health care for all Americans. And that's Dr. Nancy Dolesji from Fairfield University in Connecticut. Now, is there a way that the exemption is still not in cement to the point that we're going to find out that there is an upside to this ACA or not? Is it a done deal?
It is not a done deal. The exemption, the language of religious employer, and the exemption that is granted, as well as the president's so-called accommodation, is in regulation. And that regulation can be changed by the administration if they would choose to do so. The prospects of doing that between now and the election are slim and none. The other option, which certain groups within the Catholic community have exercised, is legally. It can be challenged, both the mandate itself, which I don't think will probably prevail, but certainly that definition of religious employer will be challenged, and is being challenged in, I think, 8 or different district courts around the country at the moment by a number of Catholic and now non-Catholic plaintiffs that have joined. And then, third, there's a political remedy. I mean, the legislature, the Congress, can step in and say, you cannot define religion this way, or they can provide other protections for religious communities, just as they did with the Religious Land Use and Institutional Practice Act that came about, just as they did with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA it's called, countering some Supreme Court decisions and countering actions of the government at various times. So there are many areas of redress. I think the bishops are committed within these next 18 months, we've got to solve this.
And that's what we really wanted to, we're going to move on in the next half of the program to look at the propositions that we will be looking at in the ballot in November. But I did want Ned to be able to address this, because this is probably the most important issue we're going to be looking at. And one last thought, Ned, before we take the break, is there anything concretely you would be wanting our viewers to do as regards this issue that you've clarified as being a misappropriation of the word employment? It's definitely misunderstood what it is to be a Catholic institution.
That's correct, and I think yes, there will be, there have been in the past, and there will be some congressional action that we would anticipate coming up. Probably at this point, there'll be some action that will happen this September. And so stay tuned after, this program's, a good kickoff for that in September here, that there'll be some action in Congress that we'll ask you on our Catholic Legislative Network, and we'll ask you to support and to contact your appropriate congressperson or senator. There will probably be an action to approach the president. If that's not successful, there'll be an action to approach the president either during the lame duck session between Congresses, or certainly there'll be many opportunities in the January to June timeframe next year.
Well, we're going to take our break now, and stay tuned, because we're going to be back with concrete issues regarding our California ballot initiatives. We'll be back in a minute. Hello again and welcome to Forum for a Better Understanding. I'm here with Ned Dolesji. We're going to be looking at certain of the propositions that will be on our ballot. We're going to run through some of them by barely posting them and moving on, because we'll decide these are not necessarily at all guided by Catholic doctrine, Catholic thinking, Catholic theology, philosophy, or sociology. In fact, they're just left up to you. But other things are going to be having a reason for which we want to give it a second look. Ned, the first proposition is 30, temporary taxes to fund education. What's there for us?
Well, as we approach this, and I'm going to preface jumping into that by the fact there's 11 of these ballot initiatives. We're not going to highlight them all. You can again go on cacatholic.org and you can get the Reader's Digest version that I mentioned earlier. Proposition 30, through some machinations of the legislature, is now the first one on the ballot for this fall. This is the governor's proposed temporary tax extension. And so they would like to raise anywhere between $5.8 and $9 billion from a combination of taxes imposed in a temporary fashion over the course of 7 years. This is very controversial. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of excitement in the electorate for raising taxes, but at the same time, as Catholics, I think we have to judge our responsibility to the common good, our sense of whether or not taxation is a good way to go, but most importantly, the consequential arguments. There are triggers that are going to go into effect here if we do not close this budget deficit. The governor has proposed one way. Catholics are asked to look at that, and the bishops are not going to take a position on this initiative. But we would ask people, please, take a hard look at this, understand what the impacts are of this budget and the need to fill this particular hole here. And so it's going to be fairly controversial. I think we might have a few moments to talk about the other tax piece too, but this will be the centerpiece, and a lot of money will be spent on this initiative.
What about Prop 31, which is hoping for a 2-year state budget cycle? Does that have any Catholic implication?
It doesn't have any direct Catholic implications. Certainly our interest in the common good and our interest in the fact that, that we have a process for governing ourselves that's respectful and responsible. This is a proposal coming from a number of different groups. I think California Forward is one of the groups, a bipartisan group, who've put together a number of reforms of the current system that we have for government. We again will not have a formal position on this. As someone who works in the business, I ask people, please take a serious look at these, because we need some of these things. So that's an editorial comment.
These are left to your own discretion.
They are left to your own discretion.
Prop 32, calling for prohibitions on contributions to candidates. Any position?
Well, the ballot title of this sort of does not accurately state what this is about. This is essentially about prohibiting unions from co-opting dues that members have paid and using it for political purposes.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is a very, very controversial issue. Those in unions and those who are, part of the union movement in our state are very concerned about this restriction on their ability to gather funds and to spend them appropriately. Obviously, other people in the society are interested in curtailing this expenditure of union dues within the public order. It's going to be very, very controversial. This is another one that you're going to see. The governor's initiative and this one are going to gather most of the spending in this current election cycle. And this is one that each of you needs to spend some time and serious thought and prayer about.
That's really great, Ned, to know that though there is going to be no direction given, the call is to be alert and perceptive on our own. In other words, to do our own homework on this one. Prop 33, which is changing law to allow auto insurance companies to set prices based on drivers' history of insurance coverage. I don't see a Catholic wisdom on this one.
Good luck on that one. And I would suggest that people again take a look at our summary information, and we'll try and provide some reflections for you on it, but don't look for any Catholic direction on this one.
Now, the next one is important. It's Prop 34, the death penalty repeal. I will admit that as a diocese, we became involved in this. We put it on the ballot because we see it as very important, and we do hope you will give it major consideration. Ned, tell us some of the impact of Prop 34 if it passes?
Certainly, as you've described, Jim, this does repeal or replace the death penalty. That's a better way of saying it. It replaces the death penalty with life in prison without parole and requires that those inmates so convicted are involved in work and in restitution and paying that back. Its moment in time is brought forward by the opportunity for the state to save $100 million or more each year for quite a few years. It will be somewhat hotly contested. You're correct, the Catholic bishops took an early support position on this. We have a position that the Pope has invited, Pope John Paul first invited us to make this much more public, and Pope Benedict has certainly followed through, and the Catholic bishops of the United States have said, that this is an issue of serious concern. Now, this is not an issue of faith and morals, but this is an issue of serious prudential judgment for a Catholic. In this respect, we have to understand that the Catholic teaching on the death penalty is not abolitionist. We are not people who believe that the death penalty can never, ever, be exercised. What has been the Catholic teaching in the United States has been that in our current circumstances, the moral conditions for imposing the death penalty don't exist. That society has other ways, bloodless, less violent ways, to protect itself from these people who are heinous criminals. And so we have the opportunity to protect ourselves without resorting to violence. In Catholic teaching, the death penalty can be exercised if the society is moving to a state of anarchy, or if the society cannot protect itself from the violence that these particular individuals might perpetrate on the society. But the bishops, again, have continuously judged that we have at our disposal the means to not move to that particular type of execution as a way to solve this particular crime. The challenge that we have here is that every time we resort to the use of violence, and an execution is a violent solution, every time we resort to that, we lessen our respect for life in the society. Again, this is a prudential judgment, and each Catholic needs to hear and understand and take into themselves what the Church is teaching about this, seek the good, pray about it, and turn to God and say, please help and guide me. The bishops of California will take a position in support of making this move. This is one of these things that comes along every 25 years in California, an opportunity to change the nature and the face of our society, and we think a more compassionate and responsible way.
Many states have done this. This is something that the federal government has not done, but we are one of the few countries in the civilized world, if you want to call it so, that still executes its certain citizens. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that we would be enlightened and vote according to what the bishops are suggesting would be a good idea. Prop 35 is regarding human trafficking, another very important issue. What are the implications of this bill passing?
This particular proposal focuses primarily on sexual slavery, and it has many provisions that address the awareness of sexual slavery, that address the victims of sexual slavery and their rehabilitation within society, and address the criminal penalties for people who engage in sexual slavery. And so this proposition will gather the support of the Catholic bishops, and I would expect sometime this month you will see a statement from the Catholic bishops inviting Catholics to pray about this, to seriously consider it, and to support this particular initiative. It only begins the process. The greatest amount of human trafficking in the world is around work. Other forms of warehouse work and farm work and production work in a variety of fashions. But this human slavery around sexual slavery is particularly egregious. It's an assault on the dignity of the human person, and we should lend our voice to this. I think you're going to see this one polling somewhere in the 75 or 80% in favor. It's a good first step. It's a good move, and look for some good information on it.
There's a movie that we will be having the producer on a show, on a forum called Trade of Innocence. Mm-hmm. Very important film coming out, and we hope you'll see that, but we also hope you'll think of voting yes on Prop 35. Prop 36, three strikes law, sentencing, a little bit of a modification there for the third strike. Yes. Where does that go?
That's another interesting proposal. It has come up before. As people are aware, we have 3 strikes, the three serious felonies, and you're in jail for the rest of your life. We already have a habitual criminal law which we could impose. This is a little more draconian. This law will basically adjust the 3rd strike to make sure it's a serious and violent felony before someone is put away for life in prison for that particular penalty. So the bishops, I don't think, are going to have a formal position on it. We have in the past supported the reform of the 3 strikes laws, but this will be again, you'll see good information from the Catholic Church coming out to help guide people's reflection and hopefully their decision on this issue.
The last one we want to look at briefly is Prop 38, proposing a tax for education for early childhood programs. Where are we on that?
Prop 38 is the other tax initiative by Ms. Munger from LA, and this one cuts across all the levels of taxation in the state and focuses it primarily on education. I think there's not going to be a Catholic position on this particular initiative. It will have some controversy surrounding it because it taxes everyone across every tax code, and that disproportionately impacts those that are poor in some ways. I think some of our education people will like it a lot because it does provide a lot of direct money to education. I think other people will be critical of it because it does tax low-income people in a way that might not necessarily be helpful.
I think our last slide is going to be Pope Benedict XVI. Do you want to read that and let us know what the Pope says as we conclude our program?
Sure. There are complex things out there, and we're always sort of challenged when we get to that moment in the electoral booth and we're trying to figure out what to do. I think it's helpful for us to listen to the end of Deus Caritas Est and to know that we are helped by the knowledge that in the end we're only instruments in the Lord's hands. And this knowledge frees us from the presumption of thinking that we alone are responsible for building a better world. In all humility, we will do what we can, and in all humility, we will entrust the rest to the Lord.
Well, Ned, I want to thank you for sharing so well 2 programs about your work up at the California Catholic Conference. We want to thank you for what you do there and what you did here. We want to invite people to go to the website, and we'll be back next week with another program. And until then, God bless.